we have our new guest. Could I ask you to introduce yourself to our viewers and to tell a little bit more about your educational background?
Of course, yes. Hi, I'm Franziska. I'm from ÖH, the Austrian National Students Union. I'm international officer there, and I've been international officer since July of 2023. So I have been doing this for a year now, but I've been in the students' movement since 2020. I study socioeconomics in my master's right now. That is basically my background.
Okay, good to hear. I would like to ask you about the current landscape of higher education. What is the landscape of your higher education like in your country, and especially in terms of mental health?
For the Austrian context, mental health is still it's the issue if you talk about students' well-being in Austria right now, because if you look at the numbers, if you look at the surveys from 2022 or 2023, we can see that over 50% of students are actually struggling with mental health. So it's basically the directive of the whole conversation right now. But what we can also see is that it's getting worse and worse. For years now as well. So due to the rise in competition in higher education, rise in tuition fees, and pressure from higher education, from the system behind it, students are struggling more and more with mental health. This is basically what it looks like in Austria right now.
50%, that's an insane amount.
Yeah.
Insane. Could we please talk about the structure of the support which can the students expect in Austria from the university, maybe?
So right now, unfortunately, what we can see is that the structure for mental health support in Austrian higher education institutions is what we would call as below par. So we see these numbers that students in Austria are struggling a lot with mental health issues, but there is no proper structure in higher education institutions to support those students. So there might be some counseling sessions available at some universities or other higher education institutions, or there might be like some therapy sessions available, but this is not at every higher education institution, and this is way too little. So we see students struggling, but we do not see higher education institutions reacting to the struggle by offering the necessary support structure behind it. So
there is no reaction of the higher universities to the needs?
Unfortunately, not enough. So what we have seen with the numbers coming in from after COVID is that higher education institutions are reacting to it a little, but it's way too little for the problem that we are facing currently. We have local unions who are stepping in. We have our own support systems that I'm sure you can talk about a little later as well. So there are certain institutions that are actually stepping in and trying to do the work, but unfortunately it's not enough, and it's also a struggle because most students then turn to privately organized support for themselves, but this is way too expensive most of the time, and there's not even enough spots enough spaces in therapy to provided for those students. So there's way too many students actually looking for spaces than there are available.
Are there any mental health services readily available or accessible to students? Any other maybe ways? You mentioned private ways, but...
Yes, exactly. I mean, of course there are private ways in the sense of doctors that you can reach out to, but a lot of them have wait lists because they're so full. But there are other institutions, as I've said before, the local unions who are stepping up, who are providing counseling for students. There's our institution, so the HA is actually providing a helpline for students where they can get free consulting basically and can get help for free, where we have now I think 120 students that we can support each month through this helpline. So there are some ways and there's some support systems, but it's not enough.
Franziska, what are the types of counseling services offered to the students in Austria?
So I've already said there's a lot of counseling that is being offered, a lot of group counseling that local unions, for example, are offering for students, but also universities themselves. We've seen this, if there's some kind of crisis going on, then a lot of them offer like short-term counseling for students as well. Some have it all year round, no matter the situation. Yes, and there's always priority therapy, but as I've said, this is something that is very costly and something that is very inaccessible.
Is there any way, for example, a person could seek help on their own, like let's say therapy books, maybe any help at the internet?
There are definitely some sites and organizations and institutions that are trying to provide information for those for people struggling with mental health issues that are readily accessible on the internet. So this is always one first step, to go on the internet and see what you can find there, which resources you can find there. As I've said before, there are also helplines like what we do right now that are also accessible basically by phone click. So
from the almost the most difficult step, the first step, this is the internet is the most accessible, the most easiest one. Okay. Are there any innovative programs in Austria to support students' mental health, or any movements, organizations?
I mean, the biggest innovations are the ones that I would like to say are the ones being done by the student movement itself. So not only what we do as the national union, but also what our local unions. So we have seen a lot of local unions create funding, so create funds for students to refinance their therapy sessions, so they can apply for funds to have their therapy sessions paid.
That's correct.
Yes, and this is especially necessary because we see that students, like we see in our student social survey from 2019, for example, that students struggling with mental health issues are then again I think twice more likely to also struggle financially. So it's exactly those programs that we need right now.
We've talked about innovations, but could you tell me a little bit more, how is the mental health awareness promoted among students, or are there any specific campaigns?
There are local campaigns. Again, those are done by local unions. A lot of the time there are also local campaigns from higher education institutions sometimes. There are also organizations that are not university or higher education specific who are doing campaigns for young people, for the mental health of young people. So there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of awareness being raised and a lot of people trying to promote the services that exist and the information that is out there to the people who might need it.
You've mentioned previously about the COVID-19 pandemics.
Yes.
What was the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic to the mental health of the students, especially?
Of course, if we look at the 2022 to 2023 numbers, we see that this is an enormous rise after the COVID-19 pandemic. So of course it had a huge impact on students, and I think this is not only Austria specific. We see this on a global scale, that students were struggling during the pandemic, but also after the pandemic, getting back into a kind of normal higher education cycle again.
What would be the first advice you would give to a person seeking mental help or struggling with mental help?
I think the first step is to try to reach out to one place, try to reach out to your local union, your national union, try to reach out to an organization that you know and trust, that provides information, and try to start small and find some bits and pieces of how you can get support. So which support is available, which support would fit you, and how you can finance it, for example. That is also always a very big question, and I think there's a lot of organizations out there that provide that information. So it's just to kind of take that leap and ask that question, even if it's anonymously on forums, or if it's anonymously in a counseling session, and it's also possible, or just on the internet in a blog.
And there are people who want to help us, just we have to reach out to them, right?
Yes, I think, yes, there are people that are willing to help us, but there's also a lot of resources already out there. It's just to try not to get overwhelmed in the beginning and then not reach out, to just kind of take that leap and get into action.
How would you encourage maybe your colleagues or other students to promote mental health awareness in the country, especially?
I mean, the easiest answer to that is to organize yourself in some kind of organization. I mean, obviously I would promote the student movement, so organize yourself in a local union where you can actually promote mental health on your campus, or organize yourself in a national union to campaign for it nationally, or any other organization that is concerned with mental health. But there are a lot of them out there. And just kind of get started.
Make the first step.
Yeah.
Franziska, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.